getting asked a lot lately if I could create a label that showcases the position size you can afford to take based on the size of your account. And as you can see in the top left corner of this SPY chart here, I have gone ahead and done that. If you have a $25,000 account, or if that is the position size you are willing to trade in this strategy, whatever it may be, you can afford 43 shares of SPY as it is currently trading at 572 and 52 cents. Now, I'm unable to pull your account data into code within ThinkorSwim. So I'm unable to access how much money you actually have in your account and pull that information in. So what you're going to need to do once you add this label to your chart is you're going to need to come into the settings cog of the study. And here you can very easily adjust your position size. Say instead, like you only have a $2,000 account, or you only want to take $2,000 positions, whatever it may be. Of course, you adjust that. You can see the number in the label change, as well as the calculation for how many shares you can afford of whatever ticker you are looking at. As I switch to Nvidia, which is currently trading at just less than $112, you notice it change. If I switched over to something like AMD, you of course also notice it changes. So it will automatically run on any ticker you're looking at. And of course, the time frame is also unimportant, as the price will be the same. The current price will be the same no matter the time frame you're looking at. Now, this indicator, this label is extremely simple. In fact, I'll pull up the source code for it here so you can see this while I'm yapping about what's coming up in the video. Within this video, we're also going to build labels that showcase the position size you should take based off of risking low of day and the amount that you are willing to risk. And we'll even build it based off some indicators like the average true range, which is one that I love to use for a stop loss, the RSI, the simple moving average, etc., etc. So we're going to build multiple different position size labels in today's video based off of strategic risk. First, let's talk about the low of day risk position size calculation. Say you're looking at the intraday chart of GV here. This is a ticker that was a massive runner yesterday and huge in after hours and pre-market as well. Of course, has sold off really hard since market open today, but starting to catch a bid, and you have an idea of like, hey, I see decent risk reward here. You know, I think this thing has a chance to even dead cat bounce back to $5, and I'm willing to risk, 10, 15, 20 cents for that potential 70, 80 cent move up. I only need to be right like 1 out of every 4 times to break even on a bounce play like this. So using this label size calculator here, you can come into the input parameter again. And this time, instead of entering the amount of money that you would like to put into the position, you instead enter the amount of money you are willing to risk in the position. I'm willing to risk $100 in this trade. That is the default parameter. So my risk is currently 21 cents. 20 cents, obviously it'll be moving. So I can take 500 shares. That makes sense, right? If I'm willing to risk low of day is currently 20 cents away from the current price, and I'm willing to risk $100, then I can buy 500 shares of this ticker. Of course, if I was willing to risk a different amount, say, just so the calculation looks a little funky, say I'm willing to risk $225 in this trade. Of course, my number of shares is going to jump up. My risk amount stays the same, of course, coming down a little bit with the price coming down a little bit closer to lows. But now that we're 18 cents away from low of days, if I'm willing to risk $225, I should buy 1,500 shares of this ticker. That low of day position size calculator, as well as the other position size calculators we will build in today's video, are available for easy import into your ThinkorSwim alongside over 120 other custom coded strategies, scanners, studies. You can even copy my exact workspaces that I use, etc., over on my website, daytradingstrategies.net. You can click into our codes and get signed up for that today. Or if you would like to learn how to build within ThinkorSwim yourself so that you can build any custom label, obviously alongside these scanners, studies, strategies, etc., whatever else you want to build. I also offer a 10 chapter course. There are 36 sections within this course, and every single section comes with both a video lesson made personally by me and a text lesson. And I'm sort of clicking through the chapters here so you can get an idea of what the sections are. But anyway, obviously this course also available over on daytradingstrategies.net if that tickles your fancy. Link in the description down below. Go click on the link, check it out, read the reviews, decide if it's something that can help accelerate your trading journey. Let's go ahead and leverage this default line of code here to build the equation for when we want to get stopped out of our trade based off of the average true range indicator. Instead of initializing the variable with the keyword plot, because I don't want actually anything plotted onto the chart here, I'm going to change this to defined. This just means that I can call this variable later in the code, and we of course will do so when we build out our label. So I want to get stopped out of the trade when we are at our entry price, or should I say not entry price, from the current price, because that is where we would be entering if we were to look to enter a strategy, and that is what we want to see our entry size based off of. So the current price of the ticker, which actually I should have just left close typed in there, because within ThinkorSwim, close also represents the current price of an open candle. And I want to subtract from that, of course, the ATR study. And I'm going to subtract the ATR study. First off, I'm going to subtract the ATR study of the previous candle rather than the current candle. This stock's actually not moving a lot. Let's see if it does while I'm talking. But you'll notice that the ATR value changes with the current candle, because of course the current candle is building its own range from high to low. I don't want to be basing my calculations off of a changing variable, because those can give us misleading results, right? I want my calculation based off of a stagnant variable. So let's take the ATR value from the previous candle. To do that, we are going to displace the ATR value we pulled by 1 by putting a bracket 1 after our ATR. Now, also, in this instance, I don't just want to stop out at close minus ATR. I want to multiply that ATR value by 2. Let's give it 2 times its ATR to the downside for our stop loss. Of course, you can and should adjust this value according to what you find works best to help achieve your trading goals. This is just an example that I'm building out right now, and I think adding in this multiple is a good example. Essentially, that's why I'm doing it, not because I'm saying I think this is the best way to do it necessarily. Okay, so we have our data variable, that is the name of our variable, data, and it's currently storing the value of our calculation for when we would like to get stopped out of our trade. Or should I say more specifically, it is showing us the price in which we will get stopped out of this trade. But that's not the full story. We need to know what the user of this label is willing to risk, and then we need to include that risk in this calculation to actually calculate position size. So to gather the information for what the user is willing to risk, at the top of our code here, let's go ahead and initialize another variable, this time utilizing the keyword of input. And I'm going to call this variable position. Actually, no, sorry, not position size. That is what we're calculating. I am going to name this variable risk, and I'll set it by default to 100. So by default, the user is willing to risk $100 per trade. But since I created it as an input variable, what that does, oh, actually right now this code is broken because we're not plotting anything. Let me change this back to plot real quick just so the code isn't broken. There's your, that's actually not the most useless thing to see either anyway. That blue cyan line is what the data calculation is currently calculating, the price at which we would sell at. Of course, we need to include this risk calculation in that to get to position size. Anyway, just wanted to fix the code quick. What that input variable is going to do is now clicking into the settings cog of the study, you can see the variable that we named risk and the value that we set here can now be changed. So if the user wanted to risk $500 instead, all they would need to do is change it from the settings cog. You will notice, of course, that changes on the front end here. You now have your 500 parameter showing in your new study parentheses, but however, it doesn't change the source code, which is nice. You don't have to come in and mangle the source code every time you change something. It will just save that $500 risk as long as you have this study open. But if you were to close this study and then reopen it, it obviously goes back to that source code of 100. Anyway, let's now begin to make use. First off, let me change this back to defined. We don't need to see that blue line. And let's go ahead and begin to build in this risk amount into the calculation of where we are willing to sell so that we can begin to know how much position size we should be taking. You know, actually, like one of the main functions of a label in coding is for testing so that you can have a visualization of the information that is stored inside your variables while you are working on them so you can ensure that you're working with the data that you expect to be working with. So let's actually maybe jump ahead here a little bit into the actual add label function. Add label, open close parentheses, end every single line of code with a semicolon. And let's talk quickly about the parameters within this. And let's go ahead and set up the add label function so that while we're working on this equation, we can see the data that we are working with. That will just make building the equation that much more clear and that much more easy to understand. Sort of killing two birds with one stone here, going over the add label function and being able to talk through this calculation. Over on the ThinkorSwim Learning Center site, which is an extremely useful website, they have every single function available within ThinkorSwim, obviously the name here, along with all of the input parameters that it accepts. Add label accepts parameters of visible, text, color, location, and size, and it accepts them in that order. Just wanted you to see this so that when we build out this function, you sort of have an understanding of what we're doing. Remember, the first parameter of the add label function is visibility. This is where you can enter conditions for why the label should show versus why it shouldn't show. Well, really, the only standalone function of this study is showing this label. So I want it to always show up. So to do that, I'm simply going to enter yes as my value for visibility in that first parameter for our add label function. You separate your parameters using commas, and the second parameter in the add label function is text. For right now, let's go ahead and look at the value that is stored within our variable named data. If we go ahead and apply, you will now see a small little label up there in the top left that is currently showing $4.32. It's showing $4.32 because that is the current price of this ticker minus the ATR of the previous candle times 2. So now we just got a new candle. So the ATR of the previous candle was 9 cents, just about 9 cents. So we should be willing to risk 18 cents from the current price. The current price is about $4.50. Our label here is showing $4.31, $4.32. So that is working correctly. Now we need to begin molding this data so that we are actually calculating the position size based on the risk that the user is willing to accept. So to calculate our position size, what we should need to do is we should need to find the difference between the current price and the price we are willing to sell at. So rather than just seeing the price we want to sell at, I need to know what that difference is. And then if I divide our risk variable by that value, that should, if I'm thinking of this correctly, give us our correct position size that we should be buying in order to match this risk amount when taken into the amount we are willing to risk into account. So to, of course, find that gap, let's do close minus data. So the current price minus the price we are willing to sell at is essentially all we're looking at here. So now I'm willing to risk just about 13 cents in this trade. If I then wrap this entire equation in a parentheses so that it is signified as my numerator, let's make risk let's make risk the numerator and our difference the denominator. I'm not good at math words. So risk divided by that gross amount that we are willing to risk. If I go ahead and apply this, it's showing 693. So if I'm willing to risk 13 cents a share, would buying 693 shares make that risk $100? Let me go ahead and load this up and actually look. I don't know. If I buy 693 shares and I lose 13 cents a share, I would lose 90 bucks. The real risk was like 13.8 or something like that. So that should be about right. Let's just look again. 693 times. It was like 0.1388 or some crap. Yeah, right about 96, 100 bucks. That looks to be right. So it looks like we're performing this calculation correctly. Kind of during that whole build, there was some pretty gross like decimals in play. And we even just saw in that calculation how the decimals sort of throw off the exact correct calculation. We can get rid of those decimals by wrapping the calculation in a round function. So I'm going to type round, open parentheses, and at the end of our calculation, I'm going to put in a comma because the second parameter of round is the number of decimals you would like to round to. I would like to round down to 0 decimals, close the parentheses of our round function, and as I hit apply now, you'll notice all the decimals go away. So buy 689 shares. However, then there's also another issue with this in that it's just rounding correctly, right? So if the decimal is above 0.5, it's rounding up. Well, I always want to round down. I don't ever want to be buying more shares than my risk. Like if there's any decimals at all, just round down. Easy to do. There is also a function in ThinkorSwim called round down that accepts the exact same parameter. So as I now hit apply, nothing changes right now. It must have not been rounding up, but this just ensures that it never rounds up. So write round down, wrap inside of it your equation, and you can put comma 0 so that you can see the exact whole number of shares rounded down that will align with whatever risk you have inputted in your risk parameter here. There's sort of a theoretical issue with this label, and that is like, what if you don't want to, or you don't have the funds to buy 730 shares of this thing? What is 730 times? We're currently trading at about 4.52. I mean, that's a $3,300 position. What if, one, you don't have $3,300 or you're just not willing to put that much into a trade like this? Well, we can build a catch that let's set a max amount, and if the trade is going to go over that max amount, then rather than showing us based on the risk, show us based on the max amount instead. We're going to do that in just a second. Before we do, let's go ahead and clean up this label because I want to be able to see what's going on a little bit better. Right now, it's real small in this like ugly red color up there in the top right. So speaking of color, the third parameter in the add label function is color. I'm going to set mine to color dot light gray. Need to utilize dot notation here to reference the color because that is where they are stored. They are not stored locally within ThinkorSwim. Instead, they are stored within the color data type, and they spell gray G-R-A-Y, not G-R-E-Y. That is why we were getting that error. The fourth parameter of the add label function is location. Let's just leave it right now as location dot. Once again, needing to use dot notation here, top left, and the final parameter is of size. And once again, we need to utilize dot notation to reference font size dot. And I almost always just keep it this small size, but since we're making a YouTube video here and I want you to be able to see this a little bit easier, I'm going to set it to font size dot large. As I hit apply, there we go. Hopefully now you can sort of see what's going on here a little bit easier. Now let's also talk about the text here. Let's talk about the text parameter and how we can clean this up. Right now it just says 762. And you and I, since we're building this thing together right now, we know what that means. You should buy 762 shares of this stock if you are willing to risk $100. Somebody else that loads in this code would have no idea what this label means. And you want to make your labels, and really anytime you're building code, you want to make it as readable as possible. Luckily, you can inject strings, or in plain English, letters, into your text like this. So let's start with, at the beginning of our text, initializing how much money we are risking in this trade. To inject letters into text, you need to wrap them in quotation marks. So I'm going to open quotation marks. I'm going to type risk amount equals $, and I'm going to close quotation marks. Then to sort of amend text and values together in a label, you're simply going to utilize plus, and first here, let's amend our risk variable. So whatever we are risking in this trade, let's call in that value. Then we're going to plus, and then we want to see, so if we're risking $100, then, or hold on, sorry, we got to open up our quotations. Then we're going to say, let's do a space, and let's do a colon to separate it nicely. And let's go with buy, and I will do buy space, close quotation marks, and another plus. Sorry, I'm sort of just going about this as I type it in here. So risk amount here, let me just hit apply and see what this looks like now. Risk amount equals $100. Then you buy 759. You buy 759 what? At the end of our calculation that returns our 759, let's do plus, open quotation marks, space, shares. So if I hit apply now, if we're risking $100 in this trade based off of the ATR, then we can buy 759 shares. Of course, once again, if you come into the settings cog and you want to change your risk amount, I want to risk $350 in this trade, then you should buy 2,734 shares. So that just makes the add label function even a little bit easier to read. Okay, now let's go ahead. Maybe you don't have the money to buy 2,700 plus shares of this ticker. Let's build in the max catch. And we're sort of, I want to take a half second here. I'm really going like above and beyond in building this label. You don't always have to go this deep into it and build like all these catches in and make it look this nice and this, that, and the other. I just want to make sure that you are getting the full tutorial here. Like, what's the point of watching a tutorial on how to build labels if I don't teach you every single thing you should do for your catches? So let's go ahead and build in that max amount catch. As we do this, let's take a step here to clean up the code. I'm going to need to reference this equation a couple of times in what we're about to build. And if I have to reference the entire equation every single time, the code is going to get very difficult to read. That's sort of the point of variables like this data. You build in the value within them, so all you need to do is simply call in the variable later instead of having to type in this value every single time. So I'm going to define a new variable. I'm just simply, let's just name it calculation. Sure, why not? And let's set it equal to then, of course, our calculation. So I'm going to copy this, paste this in my line of code with the semicolon. Then, rather than sort of having the whole calculation here in my text to show us the number of shares we should buy, all I need to do is type in calculation. Why did I pick a word so hard to spell? Now, as I hit apply, nothing should change. We didn't change anything in the code. Good, nothing changed. We just cleaned it up a little bit. Now, when I need to reference this calculation, which once again is the calculation to show us our position size, I can just reference the calculation variable rather than having to call or type in this entire equation. So now, to calculate and to catch a max value that you're willing to put into a position so that you don't go over that just because you can buy 2,300 shares if you're willing to risk $500. If you can't or don't want to put that much money into a trade strategy like this, then you shouldn't. First off, obviously, we need to capture that information from the user again. So let's do another input variable and let's do a max amount. And let's say that they only have $1,000 account, or they're only willing to put $1,000 towards this trade strategy. Of course, once again, that can be easily adjusted from the settings cog of the study now, since we declared the variable using the keyword input. So now we know from the user how much they are willing to put into this strategy. Now we need to figure out how many shares that would equate to. To do this is pretty easy. We simply need to take the max amount and divide it by the current price of the ticker. So let's define another variable. I'm just going to name it M, and let's do max amount divided by close, end your line of code with a semicolon. Actually, while we're working on this, once again, what's the whole point of this video? How to build and what you should use labels for. Let's use a label to decode this. Why do I keep saying to decode? To debug this. I worked in quality assurance for like 8 years. I should know what debug means. Anyway, what am I doing? Add label. Let's go ahead and add in a label here that always shows yes, that shows us that M amount. And let's also go ahead and set our size equal to font size dot large. I believe size is the name of that parameter. Yes, it is. If you didn't just notice what I did, if you call in a parameter value out of order, you need to let the machine know you're doing that by writing the name of the parameter and equals. I didn't have to do that with any of these parameters because I put them all in order. As long as you're putting them in order, the machine knows what it's reading. If you call them out of order, you have to specify that. Anyway, let's go ahead and hit apply. So based off of our max amount, we can buy 227 shares of this thing. Let's once again do the round down and wrap this to 0 decimals just so it cleans that up a little bit. Round down has 2 D's in it, Trey. Round down, we can afford to buy 220 shares of this stock, currently trading at $4.40 if we have a max amount of 1,000. And let's make sure that's correct. It's currently trading at $4.40. No, not CapCut. That's my editor. Calculator. $4.40 times 227. Okay, it does equal 909. I don't know why in my mind I thought that was more than 1,000. I'm not very smart. Anyway, looks to be working as expected. So now we have the value for how many shares we can afford based off of the max amount we are willing to trade with this strategy. And we have the value for how many shares we can afford based off of what we are willing to risk in this strategy. We just simply need to now use some if logical conditioning to determine if this value, if the value based on risk is larger than the value based on our max amount, then just buy the max amount, right? So where we are showing our text in our label, where we are telling the label function what it should show, let's use the if conditional formatting. If M, remember that is the variable that stores how many shares we can afford based off of our max amount. If that is less than the calculation variable, once again, why did I pick a word so hard to spell? What in the world? Calculation. If M is less than calculation, so if the amount we can afford with all of our money is less than the amount we can afford based off of our risk, then show this. Show what you are seeing right now. The amount of shares you can buy based off of what you are willing to risk. Else, I want to show the same exact thing, except instead of using the calculation as the number of shares we should buy, we should show M as the number of shares we can buy. And at the end of this one's text, I'm going to type in something like max catch or something like that, so that the user knows, hey, you are just simply buying the max number of shares available to your max amount position size here. So if I hit apply on this, nothing changed, and I was expecting it to. Well, M is less than calculation. M, as we know, M is 229 and calculation is 773. So M is less. Wait. Yes, wait. Did I just simply do it wrong? If M is greater than calculation. Oh, duh. What in the world? I don't know. This has been a long video. thank you guys for being strapped in with me. This video is turning into even a little bit more of a tutorial than I expected when I started making it, if you can't tell. But if M is greater than calculation, if the amount of shares that we can afford to buy is greater than the amount of shares that we can buy based off of our risk, duh, Trey, then we want to take the right amount of shares based off of the risk, else we want our max catch. So since, remember, we could afford, when I was doing it incorrectly, the calculation variable is at 735 shares. Since we can only afford 225 based off of our max, then it jumps down and it is using this second value here in which we are referencing M rather than calculation. Okay, it is working correctly. I'm just once again dumb. So now if I come into the settings of the study and I change my max amount to something like $25,000 instead of $1,000, hit apply, you will notice that we could now afford to buy over 5,700 shares of this stock at the current price with $25,000. But if we only wanted to risk $100 based off of the average true range multiplied by 2, then we should buy 698 shares and our label adjust accordingly to show that. Okay, we now have this entire label finally set up. And I know that was a lot of work. We're 30 plus minutes into this video. First off, I just really wanted to teach that as clear as possible. And second off, the reason I wanted to teach it as clear as possible is because you now have the template. You don't really have to change a lot in this code to make any kind of custom position size label that you want. Really, all you need to do is change this data calculation and you can get a position size label for any calculation that you would like utilizing the template that we just built here today. Say you want to get stopped out of a trade if the close goes lower than the lowest low value out of the last 10 bars. You offset that by 1 because of course the current candle can never close lower than its own low. And let's actually go ahead and let's plot this value so that you can see it visually on the chart. The lowest low value out of the last 10 bars is now the cyan line on the chart. That is our new stop loss. You would be willing to buy 1,400 shares of this ticker where it's currently trading because your current risk from 434 down to 427, your current risk is about 7 cents. If you're willing to risk $100, that lands you about 1,500 shares, as you can see it jumping around obviously as the price moves. You can use labels to show you literally any information within ThinkorSwim. Obviously, anything that you can pull into code, you can show within the text parameter of a label, hopefully as I've showcased today. And today I gave you the template for a position size label based on your stop loss. If you're interested in seeing any other label types, you can let me know in the comment section down below. Hopefully you learned something in this video. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're new around here, make sure you subscribe to the channel to continue learning. And if you made it this far in the video, you're obviously interested in learning how to code in ThinkorSwim and my teaching style. I think the course would be perfect for you. I'm not just saying that because I want your money. Let's be honest. Let's all be honest with each other. That's part of it. But I've sold over 35 of these courses now. I think I just hit 35 yesterday, actually. I've never received a single word of negative feedback on this course. I truly think it is extremely helpful. And for the niche content that this is and how much time and effort I put into this course, you're not going to find this sort of information for a better price anywhere else. So if you want to learn how to code in ThinkorSwim, once again, daytradingstrategies.net, linked in the description down below. The course is there. Or if you would just like to access what I've already built, once again, you can go into our codes and under the ThinkorSwim, you can sign up and you can access all the strategies, scanners, studies, etc. that I have already built. They all come with these nice TOS share links that all you need to do is copy and paste into your ThinkorSwim. You can learn how to do all of that on the How It Works page if you have any questions about it. Anyway, daytradingstrategies.net, linked in the description down below. Go sign up today and become a better trader. With all that being said, I'm going to sign out of this video and I'll catch you all in the next one.